I'm with the most KDK Capri, the mentor and the mentee, and I am back with another episode of the Wealthy and Healthy Podcast. It has been, man, too long, right? I've been revamping the podcast. Just been working on some things. I'm actually moving into a studio soon, so I'm actually gonna have a whole space. We're gonna have a whiteboard. We're gonna have some lighting in there, so I can get out of my little bedroom where I actually keep my other studio. So. It's gonna be awesome. I can't wait for you guys to see that. So we kind of did a lot of revamping. We did a lot of just trying to rebuild the structure of the podcast, right? We want to start incorporating, new things into the podcast, right? We always want to keep doing things different. So being consistent is something that I definitely have to work on with the podcast, right? And y'all gotta hold me to it, right? Let me know how y'all feeling about these episodes. Let me know if there's, anything you want me to talk about, anything you feel like I didn't touch on. So today I really want to talk about, mastering your potential, right? I want to talk about why quitters are the best winners. I want to talk about why, you have to know when to step back and you have to know when to go all in, right? So I actually made a presentation I want y'all to see. Let me share my screen real quick. Um, let's see. Let's go ahead and share this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, like I said, we're gonna be talking about why quitters are the best winners, right? We're gonna be talking about, the power of communication. We're gonna be talking about overcoming nervousness, confidence building strategies, right? These are all things that you're gonna need when you're becoming, a successful entrepreneur, especially if you're becoming, the entrepreneur that is gonna be the entertainer, right? You meaning you're gonna be in front of the cameras, right? You're going to be doing the interviews. You're going to be, doing the ads, right? You're going to be the face of the business and the brand, right? Or are you going to be behind the scenes, right? Are you going to be doing things, behind the curtains, right? And just making sure that things operate in a certain way, right? So that comes into, knowing your part, right? And like I said, knowing when to go all in, when to take a couple steps back. Maybe it's not something that you want to do right now. Maybe it's time to quit, right? So that's why quitters are the best winners because they know how to they know when to take that step back. They know when to go all in, right? So I want to talk about mastering your potential, right? That's what the basis of today is, right? We're going to be talking about mastering your potential, becoming the best version of yourself, right? So, oh, what my bad, y'all. Hold on. Okay, so we're gonna be talking about conditions versus, visions, right? What's your life look like versus how you want it to look, right? When we talk about conditions, we always talk about, determining conditions, right? So that means, certain things that you have that, may necessarily hold you back, but are not determining factors, right? Just determining conditions. So that's if, me personally, was in a car accident, so sometimes it's harder for me to get out of bed. I had, surgery. I was in the hospital, had to learn how to walk again. So there's certain things, oh yeah, I could use it as an excuse, right? Or I could use my vision for what I want my future to look like and use that as a determining factor, right? Because determining conditions are just things that you use it as an excuse to hold yourself back, right? So when we talk about conditions, we want to talk about what it looks like now, and you always want to take accountability for your situation, right? You are the reason why you're in the situation. If you don't feel like you're making enough money at your job, you got to put in more work, right? Or maybe you're not at a job who values you enough to make sure that you are taken care of, right? So that's when you know when it's time to quit, right? So, like, when we talk about, what you want your life to look like, right? You have to understand, that excuses cannot run, your household. You have to understand that excuses cannot rule your mind, and they are not a determining factor, right? They are not the reason why things happen. They are the reasons why things don't happen, right? So limitations are an excuse, right? When you talk about conditions, those are limitations, right? Or, determining conditions that we use as an excuse, those are limitations. And limitations are an excuse, right? So we want to talk about, I want to give you three ways. I want to give you three ways to get rid of excuses, right? Because excuses are, nine times out of 10 was holding us back. I didn't feel like, waking up today. I had a long day last night. Oh, I didn't have enough time. Uh, you know, we have to find, the room to get rid of excuses and, start making, molding ourselves into that person that just gets things done, right? And, there's always going to be days where we need to take a step back. There's always going to be days where we have to work harder than the day before, right? So, first way to get rid of excuses, right? You got to evaluate the problem. When you evaluate where you're at, you're gonna be able to know where you're going, right? If you don't know what the problem is, you're not gonna know how to solve it, right? If my the reason why my business isn't getting the exposure it wants to is maybe because I'm doing everything myself, right? So maybe I need to hire a marketing team. But if I don't know why my business isn't doing, you know, doing the numbers that I want it to do, I don't know what team I need to hire. I don't know what team I need to fire, right? So you have to be able to evaluate the problem. You have to be able to know where you're at, right? Because if you're not honest with yourself and you just say, okay, I'm just gonna do XYZ to get me to where I want to be, and you know that you know down deep down, right? You know that there's reasons why you haven't got that dream job. You haven't been able to get that raise at your job. You know why you haven't been able to start that business so you can quit your job, right? You don't know why you haven't been able to scale that business and it's just eating your pockets, right? You bought another job essentially instead of starting a business and building a brand and creating wealth and passive income, right? So you have to evaluate that problem. You have to know, when to dive in into yourself, when to dive in into, looking for help, right? Looking for mentorship, looking for a trainer, looking for, a certain type of information, right? So you have to know when to evaluate that problem, right? That brings me to number two, right? When you evaluate the problem, you can know where to go get the help, right? If it's something that you have to deal with in yourself, right? You can essentially go get that help as well, right? Like say, if you have to, you have to take a couple steps back, you have to evaluate what your product is going to look like, or you have to evaluate what your service is going to look like. You have to understand what value you are bringing to the table, right? So that means you have to dive into yourself. You got to do work. You got to do these, certain type of worksheets. You got to, look at where you at financially, right? You got to look at how you're going to, deliver yourself to your audience essentially, right? So you got to seek mentorship and guidance, right? If it's a situation where I know my business isn't going the way I wanted to because I don't have enough exposure, but I say I have a job, or say I have another business that I'm running and this is just my side business that I just want to, just create some income with, or just create some passive income with, or say it is another business that you want to put your face on, right? Say you do want to run two successful businesses where you are the face of it, right? And you just need to find, say you get stuck in, your taxes, or say you get stuck in a situation where you need to hire a marketing team, or you need to learn from someone who has been where you're at, right? Who has hired a marketing team and that's worked for them, or it hasn't worked for them, right? So you need to seek mentorship, or you need to seek guidance, right? You need to seek more knowledge, right? And you need to seek wisdom, right? So number three, we're going to be talking about, you got to find and test these proven systems to see what works for you. Proven systems are the only way that you are going to scale a business. It's the only way you can be successful, period, right? And all business models are built off of proven systems, right? So you have to be able to find and test these proven systems and see what works for you, right? Plug your business into a business model that you've seen work, right? Like if you've ever worked in a restaurant and you've ever worked in fast food, you can kind of see how they have the same business model, right? But it's elevated, right? And they plug their own systems into a proven system that already works. They just plug their products in, right? They plug their own management in, right? They have their own systems when they do their cleaning. But you always know that there are certain days that things need to get done, right? And every day of the week has to be something done. Maybe, whatever works for them. If they have a certain type of staff in, then they're going to do certain type of things, right? So you find and test these proven systems, right? And you always want to test. Testing is the best way to find what works for you. Something may work for you, but something may work better. Something may, you may be able to find room for improvement, right? So you got to find and test these proven systems, see what works for you in your business, right? Everything that isn't, that's conducive to you building something and you building your brand, or you scaling your brand, is, a proven system, right? So, and these are things that we've already seen work, right? So that's how you use proven systems, and that's how you're gonna master your potential, essentially, right? That's how you're gonna master your potential. That's how you're gonna figure out how to, navigate in life. So how would a side hustle, this is just a little nugget I want to drop. How would a side hustle help you focus on your main hustle? How would, a side, extra $500 help you to where you can take some time off, or to where you can go take a vacay, or you can essentially pay for things that you didn't have, or when the money's not coming in, we always have seasons with business, right? So things can go up and down, things fluctuate, right? So how would a side business help you focus on your main hustle, right? The average millionaire has at least seven streams of income, right? So you got to figure out how to, create passive income, right? Where you're making money in your sleep, to where you don't have to worry about, that main hustle draining all your pockets, right? So how would that work for you, number one? And how would you make it work? But number two, how would that change the way you focus on your main hustle, right? And side hustles are for expenses. Side hustles are the things that you pay your car note with. Side hustles are the things that, and sometimes it's different. Sometimes, your main hustle can pay for all your bills, but your side hustles are, going to be your play money, going to be your vacation money, right? These that comes into proven systems. Whatever works for you, right? Everybody has done something and they've done it in a successful way, right? So it all comes down to what works for you. Do you got kids? Do you got child support that you got to pay? Do you got certain expenses, certain obligations that you got to meet every month, to where your side hustles may be for different things, as opposed to your main hustle, right? But your side hustles are going to be for expenses, essentially, right? Main hustles are what you're going to use to shape your lives. That's where you build wealth. That's where you build brand. That's where you build, generational wealth and generational, uh, reputation, essentially, right? The most successful are those who know when to quit, right? You got to know when to take a step back, right? You got to know when to reevaluate, reset, when to, dive all in, right? You got to know when it's time to, bring in new clientele. You got to know when it's time to nurture certain type of relationships, right? You got to know when it's time to give out free information. You got to know when it's time to charge, right? But you also have to know your value, right? You have to know what you're willing to do for you and your team, or whoever you are feeding, or whoever you're working with, and make sure that everybody is fed, right? Make sure that everybody is, essentially happy, and want to is in the furtherance of, and has the best interest of your business, and they want to further your business. They want to help you grow, and they also want to protect your business, right? So they're not going to do anything to hurt the business, right? Or hurt you, for that matter, right? So let's talk about how to skip the guessing. How are you gonna, like, how do you figure out when it's time to go all in? How do you figure out what business is right for you? How do you figure out what lifestyle is right for you, right? Because that's all what it comes down to when you build brands. It's, there's two type of brands. There's going to be a lifestyle based brand, and you're going to have brands that are essentially built on this the backstory. Lifestyle brands are, brands that are going to teach you, certain, how to live, right? Certain ways to, you know, certain practices to, just follow in your everyday lifestyle. And then you're going to have, just business based, right? So those are going to be things that help you accelerate, right? You're going to have business based brands to where they're going to be helping businesses. There's going to be people that are going to be helping lifestyles, right? But there's all type of brands, and there's, but they all play into those two things, right? So how do you skip the guess, and how do you know? How do you know when to quit? How do you know when to, go harder, so that you know that you're going to win, right? And that comes down to maximizing your potential. You got to know what service you can scale and have no problem delivering, and then some, right? So you got to be able to, know when to give free information. Like I said, you got to be able to know when to incentivize your audience, right? You got to know how to service your audience, give them more than what they pay for, right? Give them the experience, and that's what they're going to pay for, essentially, right? You want to, you know, you want to be able to balance your money, right? You want to be able to talk, and let's talk about profits versus growth. Because when you balance your money, it's always about, what money is going to yourself, what money is going towards the business, and what is going towards growing the business, right? So, when we talk about profits versus growth, profits are cool, right? They can shape your business profile, right? They're gonna, help you, say, you get your money up, and say, you got some skin in the game, and say, you got a lot of experience, you've helped a lot, you got a lot of reviews, right? but you want to, just give something for free, right? And you want to help out your community. You want to nurture those already existing relationships that you've had with people, right? Excuse me, this keeps doing that. I don't know why it keeps doing it. But growth should be the goal, right? Like I said, you got to have three types of funds for your business, right? You got to have something that's, your profits. You got to be something, something that, your funds that grow, I mean, not grow the business. Yeah, you're going to have your funds that grow the business, right? But you're also going to have funds that you're going to use to run the business, right? That's going to be essentially the re-up. That's going to be essentially equipment. That's going to be subscriptions. That's going to be payroll, right? And number three, how do you skip the guess? And this is number one, the biggest. This is the biggest thing, right? You want to niche down. You got to know your role, right? If I know my role and I know and I'm confident in what I can do, right? Because we all are, capable of doing something great. Everybody has something that they can talk for hours about, whether it's music, whether it's sports, whether it's, law, whether it's, you know, you're a doctor and you talk about health, whether you talk about medicine, right? You got to know your role, but there's always something that people can talk about for hours and hours, right? But if I'm confident in knowing that and I know that I can deliver that value, and value is, knowledge is value, and value creates money, right? But when you know your role and you're confident in doing that, you know you can not only create the value that you want to and create the money you want to in turn, but you can, skip the guessing of, okay, do is this going to be something that I want to do? Is this going to be something that I can scale down the line, right? Because when you have the passion, everything else is going to come behind it, right? When you know that you are confident in yourself, you know that you have the abilities or the skills, and you know what exactly you're willing to do, it's going to be 10 times easier for you to then jump to the marketing stage to where you start looking for that audience, right? Because there's always someone who wants to hear what you got to say. There's always someone who out there is, that thinks just like you, right? And wants to learn from you and is willing to pay to hear from you, right? And we're all capable of learning that about ourselves, right? So you got to know your role. You got to know whether you are going to be an entertainer. You got to know whether you are going to be someone who is behind the scenes doing a lot of the dirty work, doing a lot of the paperwork. Are you going to be someone who is, setting up the website? Are you going to be someone who's going to be the brand ambassador, being, someone who's good with the marketing, someone who's good with making all the connections, right? What does that look like for you, right? And it all comes down to that skill set, right? What skill set, it's when you acquire skill sets, it when you acquire a skill set and you have a tool set, right, it can become an asset. I heard that from Myron Golden, right? So when you have a tool set, right, you can then create a system. But when you have a skill set, you can then create a product, and that together is going to equal an asset, and an asset is going to create wealth or income, whatever you want to call it, right? So for example, if I'm a real estate owner, I'm going to niche down, right? And say I've went into fix and flip, say I've done creative financing, say I've done Airbnbs, right? But what has worked for you? What can you really say that you can teach someone? And what I always like to say is, if you can't teach it to a fifth grader, then you can't teach it, right? So if you can't dumb it down to the lowest level, then you don't know how to teach it, right? So if I'm a real estate owner and I say I make 3 deals a month, say I make 5 deals a month, right? But say I make 3 deals a month, or say I make 30K a month doing fix and flips, right? I'm gonna niche down. When I create a product, when I decide to create a product, I'm going to niche down into only doing fix and flips. If that is working for me, I'm gonna do fix and flips. If I am loving that money, or am I loving the exposure that I'm getting, or if I'm loving the people that I'm employing, or loving the people that I'm doing the fix and flips for, which is essentially what it comes down to. If it's all about the money, then you're in the wrong profession, right? But if I can, niche down to doing fix and flips, that is not only going to be broad, right? Because when you niche down, you're not only creating a broader, but more specific, you're finding a more specific, what is it? a more specific community to service, right? But it's also broad, and you can also, scale that faster, right? Because you're skipping the guessing, right? You're not just gonna go into, running your ads and just talking about putting real estate under, the ads or the ad topic, right? You're gonna do fix and flips, and that's going to skip the guessing with not only you and knowing what you can provide, but the people who are that you're going to be providing it for, because they know, okay, I'm ready to get into fix and flips. I've done a few Airbnbs. I want to move into fix and flips. I like construction. Maybe I know a couple construction workers. Maybe I used to be a construction worker, right? Maybe I'm more comfortable with fix and flips, right? And then I'm going to be willing to, I'm going to be like, okay, I need that, right? So you can skip the guessing with not only you and yourself and being able to go right into finding a marketing strategy, but you can also skip the guessing for your potential customers and your clientele, right? So, how do you know when to go all in, right? Like I said earlier, you want to master a skill set, right? And mastering a skill set that allows you to create equity or value versus finding, more than one thing that works and modeling that, that is how you master a skill set, right? So, meaning like when you master a skill set and you create value from that, whether it is you're servicing someone and they're giving you service in return, or they're giving you, say, money in return, say they're giving you exposure in return, right? You're going to be able to create more value off that. You're going to be able to build off of that essentially, right? And when you master a skill set, right? And then you, like I said, you add it to a tool set, right? Like Myron Golden said, you then create assets, right? And assets are, when you're not the asset, you're the leverage. He also said that when you're not the asset, you're the leverage, right? Meaning if I am the asset, if I am the business, right? If I am the brand, I am the asset. I am the value, right? I am the cash cow, right? If I am the leverage, I am the one who's being leveraged to create that brand, right? To create that opportunity, to create that experience, right? Meaning I'm the employee, essentially, right? So we're going to be talking about that versus finding more than one thing that works and modeling that. It's different when you want to, when you master a skill set and you build off of that and you create, different skill sets that all are in sync with the goal that you have in mind. So say I am like let's play off the real estate. Say if I'm a real estate owner, right? I have to build a certain type of skill set, right? I have to be able to run a business. You have to do a lot of hands-on work when you're in real estate, right? You have to know a lot about the market. You have to be able to follow the market, right? You have to be able to get funding, right? So you have to be able to know what skill sets are needed in place instead of just going and finding, 100 different ways to, find a new way to fix it and flip a house, right? Once you figure out how to master the skill set of acquiring deals, once you figure out the aspect of following up on deals, right? When you master those skill sets, right, you're going to create value and equity, and you're going to be able to build off of that versus, just building off of jumping from one thing to another, essentially, right? So when you master that skill set, you can set yourself up for those opportunities, right? When you model those proven systems, like we talked about, you don't know, you have to know what will work for you, right? And you don't know what will work for you, you know but you know what your passion drives you to do, right? So, and you know how this could shape a brand, right? And this is how you shape a brand, right? This is how you create generational wealth, passive income, right? So when you model those proven systems, you're not going to know what's going to work for you at first, right? You have to test things out, right? And the drive has to be there, right? Your passion has to drive you at some point. There's times where your discipline has to drive you, right? There's times where you have to, your emotional, your wellness isn't right. Then you have to use your passion, right? You have to use your assertiveness. You have to use your what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word that starts with an A. Your anticipation. You have to, there's times where you're going to utilize your anticipation, right? So when you model these proven systems, you're not going to know what will work for you until it works, right? But you always have to grow, right? That's where we go back on when you're skipping the guessing, right? You always have to know when it's time to grow, when it's time to scale, when it's time to take a step back, right? When it's time to stack, when it's time to spend, right? So, and this all comes down to when you're shaping a brand, right? When it comes down to shaping a brand, and it comes down to, building something that is going to uh create generational wealth or passive income, right? And it's going to push you up. It's going to, retire your parents, right? It comes down to, like I said, mastering that skill set, right? So I hope y'all following me. I hope I'm not talking in circles, right? I hope I'm giving y'all some value, right? And discipline versus obligation is, it has to play off each other, right? It has to play off each other, right? Everything has to balance, right? I heard somebody tell me the other day, we were having a general conversation, and uh somebody asked, how do you balance, I believe she said, how do you balance your personal life and with your work life and running a business at the same time? And somebody else said, there is no balance. You just gotta, create a schedule. There is balance, right? There is always balance, right? Certain days, you're gonna go harder, right? If you're off today, you're probably gonna go hit the gym for an hour. If you didn't work today, or you didn't have any calls to make, you didn't have any leads to generate, or anything anything like that, you're probably not gonna work out today, or you're gonna work out less, right? So discipline versus obligation, the want is never stronger than the habit. We can always want something, but we it's harder for us to break those older habits, right? So I can want to not smoke again, I can want to stop smoking cigarettes, but the habit is going to take over every time unless I discipline myself. And you know discipline versus obligation, because there's a difference, right? Discipline is when you have the habit, right? When you have the want to create that habit, right? Discipline is when you create an environment to where you can then be able to always win. Obligation is just something that you feel like you have to do, right? So if I feel like I can't quit, right? And I feel like I just had a rough day, right? I'm gonna feel like I have to have a cigarette, right? I'm gonna feel like I have to calm down. That's gonna be that obligation. But the discipline in me is gonna say, okay, if I want to stop smoking, I'm gonna have to create the habit of break I'm gonna have to break the habit and create a new habit of not smoking. Or when I do get have a bad day, or I do get into a situation where I want to smoke, I don't. And then the habit is going to take over, right? So the one is never stronger than the habit. So when you discipline yourself, the obligation is going to go out the window every time, right? Because when you discipline yourself, it is always going to be in furtherance of you doing better, right? You never want to discipline yourself to do something wrong or steer yourself in the wrong direction, right? So the discipline always is going to take over, because when you create new habits, you create a new environment, right? The obligation is going to go out the window, because you're not going to be essentially worried about, the want. You're going to be worried about the habit, right? So create the want, move the want into the discipline, right? The want has to be the discipline to change, right? The obligation has to be able to break the habit, right? So next we're going to talk about, you got to dive in deeper when it serves a purpose, right? When you want to serve a purpose, the discipline, you're going to discipline yourself, right? When you want to stop smoking, and you know that this is going to help you become healthier, right? It's going to help you breathe better, right? Or it's going to help you, you know your teeth are going to be whiter. There's so many different things that you're going to get all those chemicals out your body, right? There's so many different things that are going to come with you quitting cigarettes, right? For example. So you got to dive deeper into the discipline, right? And step away from the obligation, right? Because old habits are going to die hard. But once you create new habits and you create discipline, discipline is going to then play off of the habit, right? And the obligation is going to play off of your one, right? So when you dive deeper, you're going to dive deeper when it serves a purpose, and only when it serves a purpose, right? And purpose gives meaning, right? And meaning gives, you know, it gives balance, right? It gives you confidence, right? It gives you we all want to mean something, right? We are fruitful human beings, right? We are a certain type of beings to where we have to create things, right? We want to mean something. We want to, create something that is gonna mean something, right? So we gotta be fruitful, right? And that's how you know when it's time to go all in, right? When it gives you a purpose, right? When you know that you can create a discipline, and you want to not only create that discipline, but you want to create the habit of the discipline, right? So it becomes down to making that another proven system for yourself, right? So like I said, when you master that skill set, and you create, and you play off of discipline and obligation, right? When you play off of the want and the habit, right? You're gonna be able to automatically dive deeper, right? You're gonna skip the guessing, right? You're gonna skip all of the procrastination, right? So it's gonna give you purpose, it's gonna give you meaning, right? And you're gonna want to create something meaningful, you're gonna want to create something fruitful, right? So let's move on. So how do you master potential and create generational wealth? How do you do that? Let's talk about the three steps. I honestly think I skipped a. Yeah, yeah, I did. Hold on. No, did I? Okay, I didn't. I didn't. Okay, I'm tripping, y'all. Oh my God, why did it do that? Okay, hold on. Excuse my. I'm new at this, so yeah, we trying to, like I said, we revamped the things, right? So y'all work with me, work with me. So So how do you match your potential and then create that generational wealth? How do you get to that space to where you just got out of working your 9 to 5, right? You just started your business, you made a couple sales, but you want to scale that and become that. You don't even have to go to that 1%. You just want to get to that 1% of potential to where you feel like you have made it, right? To where you feel like you have mastered your potential. And then once you get there, I want you to exceed that by 10 times, right? Right? That's how you essentially quick just a quick rundown on how you master your potential and create that generational wealth, right? So I'm gonna give you the steps, right? Number one, you're gonna find a trainer, a mentor, or a teacher. These are all things you're gonna need. You're gonna need trainers, right? You're gonna need people that are gonna teach you and break things down into steps. You're gonna need mentors that are gonna give you guidance. They're gonna give you knowledge. They're gonna give you how to's and how nots, or teach you when to go right instead of when to go left, right? Because they know what is down that road, right? A teacher is going to essentially be there as your guide, right? Teachers are going to hold your hand and walk with you, right? You're going to need all three of these people, right? These are all things that we are all going to need because we're all going to be in situations to where we could just get rid of the guessing. We could get rid of the procrastination. We can get rid of the doubt. We can get rid of the no confidence, right? And we can then excel, right? There's always new ways to learn, and there's new ways to be taught. And as long as you're okay with being taught, then you're going to be able to excel, right? Because the best teachers, and once you get older, and once you get more seasoned, right, you're gonna want to start teaching. You're gonna want to start teaching people how to do the things that you've done, right? How to get to the places that you've been, right? And how to do it the way that they're meant to do it, right? Because nobody can be you, right? Because nobody is you. Nobody's went through what you went through to get where they, no two people are look the same. No two people have went down all the same roads, right? No two people have went through an experience and came out with the same outcome, right? Right? It all changes and shapes people in different ways. So number two, you're going to create a schedule of discipline and practice, right? Like I said earlier, when you create a schedule, uh, and not when you create a schedule, when you play off a discipline, right, it becomes a practice. Discipline becomes a practice and a habit, right? And when you create a schedule of discipline and habit, right, things are going to start working. When you have certain type of things that you do every day that are, play off of your health, right? If you do certain things that make you, help you work, say you work out, right? For example, say you work it every day because you want to get energy, right? Say you work it every day because you want to feel healthy. Say it makes you confident, right? Those are things that you're going to use in your everyday life and you're going to practice every day, right? To ensure that you are going to be the best and you're going to master your potential, right? You're going to be the best you, right? So you're going to create that schedule of discipline and practice, things that are only going to be in furtherance of you getting better, right? Things that are not going to be distractions, right? Things that are not going to be limitations or determining conditions, right? Things that are going to be only help you grow, right? Only help you get things done faster, only help you see things in the perspective that you want to see things in, right? So you got to create that schedule. Number three, you're going to tend towards the focus aspect instead of the habit aspect, right? So not necessarily, I'm gonna be more focused on the results and the steps, right? More than I need to get, you know, I'm gonna say that over again because I got a little tongue twisted, right? So when you're going to tend towards the focus aspects instead of the habit aspect, meaning I'm going to be more focused on the results and the steps, right, that I need to use to get there than, the want to stay the same, meaning the habits are always going to take over, like we said, right? But when you create that schedule of discipline, then you're going to be able to create more focus, right? And when you focus on things and you sit yourself down, right? And like I say, you take that step back and you say, okay, it's time to focus. Right. And you start to use your mind and you start to break habits, right? And you start to, because we're beings of we're it's human nature, right? We're drawn to habit, right? But when it comes down to the focus aspect, when you start to use your brain and you start to use your creative senses, right? You start to use you start to do things differently, right? You start to step out of your comfort zone, right? You can start to focus on things differently, right? You're going to start looking at things differently. You're going to see things in a different lens, right? And when you start to focus on things, you're going to get more things done, right? And when you focus on the results and you focus on the steps and you focus on breaking things down, the habit is going to essentially play off of the focus, right? So if I focus on doing things better in my life, if I focus on eating better, I'm going to essentially start to form that habit of doing that, right? If I say one day, if I, one thing that I like to do is, add before you subtract, right? So if I'm trying to get healthy, right? And this is something I've done. I'm trying to get healthy instead of taking things out, instead of saying, oh, I'm not going to eat that. How about I just add an apple, right? How about I just add an apple? And then the next day, I'm going to add two apples. The next day, I'm going to add three apples. Next day, I'm going to add an apple and three apples and an orange, right? And then I'm not going to have time for the other things. And that's going to become the habit, right? So focus on the aspect of, getting things done and in the aspect of breaking things down in the steps, right? That I need to get me to where I want to be instead of just me staying the same and being comfortable and just doing, trying to figure out how to master things that are not going to be that are you when let me break this down, right? When we're talking about staying the same and we're talking about comfortability and we're talking about not worrying about whether you need to open a business, not worrying about when you're going to retire. When we talk about how that works, how that's going to work for you, you're gonna want to stay the same. If you want to stay the same and you want to, and you're fine with who you are, you're fine with working at the 9 to 5, right? You're okay with not being able to, go on a vacation whenever you want. You're okay with having to send your kids to public school, whatever that case may be for you, right? If you're okay with that, then you have to focus on the aspect of growing and being better in that, right? If you want to master your potential, you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to focus on different things than you focused on for the last 5 years at your job. You're going to have to step away from your job. You're going to have to focus on different things, right? Because think about it like this, and this plays off of the thing that I said before, discipline versus obligation. We feel obligated to go to work, right? But what if we felt obligated to go all in our business? What if we felt like, okay, when you feel like you don't, we all know if we've, as, consumers, right? When you shift that, when you're in that consumer mindset, essentially, right? When you're in the consumer mindset, you're going to feel like, okay, I have to go to work because if I don't go to work, I don't pay my bills. If I don't pay my bills, then I don't have nowhere to sleep. If I don't have nowhere to sleep, I'm gonna be homeless. If I'm homeless, then my life is going to be so much harder, right? In all aspects of everything, right? Food, shelter, clothing, health, right? Everything is going to be harder for you to get access to. Another another limiting belief in another determining condition, not a determining factor, and it's not going to, shape the way that it's a determining factor and a determining circumstance, but it's not going to determine your outcome, right? That's only up to you, right? But when you master your potential, right, you're gonna have to focus on different things. You're gonna have to focus on steps and results to get you to where you want to be, right? Versus being able to, you know, be comfortable in your skin. And if you're comfortable in your skin, great. But like I said, it always has to be an aspect of, okay, I was good yesterday, but I want to be great today, right? So you have to focus on that aspect, right? And when you want to master your potential, you want to master, just becoming your best self, right? And you want to master a skill set or you want to master a certain type of, a certain type of lifestyle, right? You have to be able to focus on that instead of just wanting to just wanting to be that. You have to focus on being that, right? You have to put in the steps, right? You have to put in the work. Absolutely. Invest mentally, financially, and spiritually. I know it skipped. I got to figure out why it's doing that. I'm not too savvy with this stuff, but you got to invest in yourself. You got to invest in your personal health. You got to invest in your emotional health. You got to invest in your physical health. You got to invest in yourself financially. You have to go to classes. You have to pay to get in the room sometimes. You have to pay to, get on that platform, right? You have to pay to be able to run your business, right? You have to be able to pay for certain type of subscriptions, certain type of ads, right? You have to be able to invest in yourself financially. And spiritually, you have to be able to step back and know that you were created to do something, right? And you have to be able to, you know, and I'm not necessarily talking about being I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, right? So I believe in God. I don't believe in I believe in the Bible, but I believe in the Bible because it's not religious. The Bible is more of a way to live life, right? But I don't believe in God essentially in the way as we believe in God is it was a person, right? I believe in something created me because you just know, right? When we were made to do something, right? Our body heals itself, right? We've been put on the earth with fruit and everything works in one, big family, right? So essentially, so when you invest in yourself spiritually, you're going to be able to balance your it essentially is going to balance everything, right? Because you're going to be able to balance yourself mentally, right? You're going to be able to say, okay, I can step back, I can do some yoga, I can do some meditation, right? Or I can read the Bible, I can pray, and things start to you start to feel better, right? If you're in a bad situation, what are the first thing one of the first things you do? You're gonna pray, right? So if you invest in yourself spiritually, everything else is gonna essentially fall in line, right? Your finances are going to fall in order, right? Because you're going to be able to be mentally stable to be able to say, okay, I can deal with whatever's going to come my way because I want to get to a certain place in my life, right? So number five, you want to relate to what and who you want to serve, and you want to relate to who you want to serve with you, right? So if you can't relate to your audience, if you can't create a business or a brand that relates to anybody, you don't have a business or a brand, right? And you also want to serve with people who, relate to what you've been through, right? The way to create a perfect team, not necessarily a perfect team because nothing is perfect, but if you want to create a team that is only going to be for you, only going to be for your business, right? They have to align with your personal views and they have to align with your personal values, right? So when you relate to them and you start to like I'm one of the best bosses I know because I was one of the best employees I was ever, I was one of the best employees I knew, right? I did the extra, I did the, went the extra mile, right? But it helped me be a better boss because I knew that as an employee, a lot of times you're underappreciated and underpaid, right? Sometimes you're overworked and underpaid. Sometimes people are overpaid and they don't work at all, right? So I know that, I can relate to the people that I want to, work with, right? Because I know how it is to be an employee, right? So once you can relate, you can, you can start to you can start to multiply, right? Because once you start to relate to people, they're going to relate to the people that they work with, right? Say I work with somebody and they like, hey man, you know, uh Kate Capri, she been through that, right? And now she's a business owner, right? I just went and took her course. I just went and bought her ebook, and you got to read it too, right? We can learn a lot, right? And then they're gonna relate to me, right? Because there's people that just want to hear what you have to say. There's people that, I heard something the other day and it said the number one reason why people say no to an offer is because essentially who brought it to them, right? So if I get a call right now and they say, hey, my name is you know, Harry from, the bodega around the street, right? We're looking for 10 businesses that we want to bring in, talk beat, right? If I hear, hey, my name is Damon John, or my name is Mike Vestille, or my name is Russell Brunson, right? And we're looking for 10 businesses that we want to help grow and create funding or create marketing strategies for. Would you like to be one of those 10? Would you like to be would you like to be what is the word? I'm so tongue-tied today, right? But would you like to be someone who we come in contact to, right? I'm gonna say yes, of course, just because I know who that person is, right? I can relate to that person. I've seen that person. I have bought their products before. I have learned from them, right? So if I can relate to what or who I'm gonna serve and who I'm serving with, right, I'm gonna be able to multiply, right? And I'm gonna be able to master my potential, right? Because I'm gonna be able to, I'm gonna be able to know what my purpose is, right? I'm gonna be able to know who I am really going to be able to serve. And when you know who you're gonna serve, and when you know what they're getting from you, you're gonna know, because you can't build a product and just say, okay, I went through this and this is how I got to this point. I'm gonna sell it to you. No, you have to know what they went through, right? You have to know that if you're a mom and you started a business, you have to start relating to moms who are starting a business, right? Because they know about the sleepless nights, they know about picking their kids up from school and only getting an hour to themselves in a whole month, right? They know how that works, right? So number six, you want to integrate your brand with your life. Your brand is going to be like your lifestyle essentially, unless you want to, if you're going to be a business to business brand, meaning you're just going to show people how to, you're just going to be a business based brand to where you're just going to, pump out the products, right? The brand is the products, right? But if you're going to have a brand where you're going to have a personal brand, you're going to have a lifestyle brand, you're going to start living this lifestyle. The owner of Amazon is not going to be, you know, Amazon is only the products, right? The products. It has certain type of services that it's known for, but the person who owns Amazon is not going to be known for speedy service or, having everything on the market. That is Amazon, right? So if you have a business to business uh brand, right? You're going to want to that's going to be your side hustle, right? That's going to be something that you got that passive income, right? But you're going to want to transition into having a lifestyle based brand or having a personal brand, right? You want to integrate your brand with your life and your lifestyle, becoming your best self and being the face of something great and sustainable, right? When you create something that is great, or you've done something great, or you've done something of substance, right? Somebody's going to want to learn that from you, right? So you can create a brand off of that. You can create a foundation off of that, right? So let me ask you, why do you think quitters are the best winners, right? Excuse me. So why are quitters the best winners? Quitters are the best winners because they know when to move on. They know when to take a step back. They know how to perfect one thing and move on to the next. It's all about growth, right? You don't see someone being in one profession in their whole life. A lot of people, they'll spend a lot of their good years in a profession, right? And then they'll go on to something that they want to do because they want to go on to something that they want to do now because they've perfected it, or they've done what they wanted to do, right? So now they're going to move on, right? So you got to figure out a formula for yourself, right? What works in your business model, right? I'm a chef who does credit repair. It works for me. I love to cook, right? I'm also, shifting into, becoming a vegan, right? I have cookbooks out. I have juicing tutorials out, right? It's something that I love to do, right? And I'm not someone who likes to be in the house all day. I'm not someone who likes to take 3 or 4 vacations a year. I like to have some purpose. I like to I know, and don't get me wrong, I like to have fun. I like to party too, right? But you have to start doing things that have purpose and substance in your life, right? So you're going to want to figure out what works for you, what works for your business. Something, that is going to create a sense of balance in your life. You're going to have times when you're going to have fun. You're going to have times when you're going to have time for your family. You're going to have times when you have, personal hour, you know, to where you can still be able to go to your son's baseball game or your son's basketball game, but still be able to be in your meeting on Monday, right? Sorry, this keeps. Okay, I'm just looking at my notes right now. So, um, you know, you got to think about what has substance for you, right? Tangible and non-tangible, right? What are things that you need to have in your life? What are essentials? Everybody wants to live nice, right? Everybody wants to have nice things, right? But you don't want to be in a situation to where those things are what makes you happy, right? So think about the things that are tangible and non-tangible that have substance in your life. Once you figure out that balance, things are going to start, things are going to start working. Okay, that's why quitting while you're ahead makes you focused and productive, so you can ensure you're not dibbling and dabbling. You can ensure that you're actually making a difference and you're making impact, right? And that's when you start to see things change. That's when that's when you start to see things start to shift, right? You're going to start seeing, you know you're going to start seeing, essentially you're going to start creating that new lifestyle, right? You're going to start becoming that new person, right? So that's that's how right? That's how you skip the guessing. That's how you know when to dive all in. You know when to take a step back because you're doing something with substance. You're doing something that you enjoy. You have a brand that you've built on something that you value, right? You have something that you can call, you can call your own, right? Something where you don't work for somebody and actually people work for you, and people want to work for you. People want to protect your business, right? People want to push that out. People want to send people to you because they're learning from you, right? So I want to ask y'all, what has changed for you since you started or even thought about scaling your business or starting your business, right? What has changed in your mindset, right? What has molded you to want to become that person, right? What have you done in your life to where you're at the point where now is the time, I want to change my life. I want to become that new person. What have you done, right? And think about the goods and the bads. What have you done and what have you not done? Right? And then you start to think about what type of person you want to become, right? Or if you already are that person, what type of person, or, if you already are that person, how you want to be better at that, how you're going to wake up every day and be that person, right? Right? Because nobody's perfect, right? How are you going to wake up every day in furtherance of you becoming the best mom? How are you going to wake up in furtherance of you becoming the best chef? How are you going to wake up in furtherance of how are you going to wake up every day, and becoming the best basketball player, right? How are you going to use intention and use your discipline and your obligation to yourself, to your family, to your finances, to, you know, everything that every relationship that you built, every contract you've signed, and how are you going to make that balance in your life? How are you going to discipline yourself to be able to create that passive income, right? And what is the side hustles that you're going to do? What are those going to do for your life, and what is your main hustle going to do for your life, right? So start to think about that. Start to think about how things are going to start to work for you. Start thinking about how you're going to start, becoming this person, and more importantly, what you're going to do when you become that person, right? And this is the start. Everyone starts somewhere, right? And it's up to you. It's up to you. You right? You get to choose where you're gonna go and where you're at, right? And you get to choose whether you're gonna chase a dream and turn it into reality, or are you just gonna die paying bills, right? Are you gonna die working for somebody else? Are your kids gonna grow up and learn how to die working for somebody else? And so on and so forth, right? Are you gonna watch your community be broke? Are you gonna be someone who helps innovate? Are you gonna be someone who helps create? Are you gonna be someone who helps invent? Right? So you gotta work, and you gotta work with somebody, you gotta work with people, you gotta create a community, you gotta create a brand, right? You gotta create your business, right? And when you start to do that, you're gonna start to master your potential. Things are gonna start to change. You're gonna start becoming that person that you always wanted to. That person that seemed so far away, seemed to plan its away, seemed like something that you wouldn't be able to do until you got rid of all the foolishness, or you got all your party days out, or you sold your oats, or whatever the case may be. You're gonna start seeing that change, right? You're gonna start accelerating your growth, and you're gonna start making that and creating that value, right? You're gonna start not only, and isn't this wasn't just about growing your business. This is about you becoming someone new mentally. This is about you shaping yourself and creating someone that is meaningful, right? And creating that purpose for yourself, right? And that all comes down to who you want to service and what value you want to deliver, right? So that concludes this week's episode of the Wealthy and Healthy podcast. I want to highlight my courses coming out. I'm gonna be teaching everybody that visionary mindset, and it's called the Visionary Mindset Academy. I kind of messed that up, but it is coming out soon. I actually have a live webinar on Friday. I'm gonna drop the link and everything down below. But I want everybody to like. I want you to comment. I want you to tell me how I'm doing. I want you to let me know if this conversation is engaging. Right? Let me know. Right? I want you to subscribe. If you keep investing in me, I'm gonna keep investing in you. If you like what you're hearing, if you're getting some value, if you've been taking notes, if you're hearing something that you can resonate with, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Right? Download my ebook. my ebooks are out, right? I got 3 ebooks out. I actually have one free one that you can download. The other ones are not more than $30, right? But these are going to be ebooks that are going to teach you how to shift your mindset. I also got one out right now that is 30 businesses that you can start with the lowest fail rate and that anybody can start right now. It's only $20, I believe, right? And there's going to be another one that is coming out where we're going to be talking about credit, right? We're going to be talking about credit next week. We're actually going to be start diving into certain type of topics, right? I'm actually going to start interviewing, right? So we're going to have a lot of new things coming. Like I said, we're revamping the podcast. I really wanted to start changing things up and start, recreating how I give you guys some value, right? I hope you guys like it, right? So book a call with me, right? Book a 10-minute motivational call with me to where I'm gonna give you 10, if you give me 10 minutes of your time, I'm gonna give you 10 minutes of value, right? I'm gonna give you 10 minutes of motivation. I'm gonna give you 10 minutes of, uh, just clarity, right? I'm gonna give you 10 minutes of innovation, right? I'm gonna give you 10 minutes of just being there as someone that you can talk to and someone who you can help and shoot your ideas off of, bounce off of, right? So book a call, it's free. And like I said, all the links are gonna be down below. And yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. Let's work together, man. Let's start linking up. Let's start talking to each other, right? Let's start growing these businesses. Let's start nurturing relationships that we already have in our businesses. Let's start creating new ways to win, right? And in turn, you're gonna start mastering your potential, right? You're gonna start becoming someone different, right? So with that being said, I want to tell everybody I'm gonna be back probably tomorrow. I'm gonna probably drop some more heat tomorrow. And we just gonna keep rolling off of there. Like I said, probably in about a month or so, we'll have the actual podcast location pop up, and everybody's gonna love it. I'm gonna have a whiteboard. We're gonna be, doing a lot of talking. I'm gonna have, certain type of people coming in and speaking. Like I said, the Visionary Mindset Academy is gonna be dropping soon. You're gonna get a lot of value in that, right? I'm gonna teach you so many different things. I'm going to teach you so many different ways to create, shift your mindset to, from consumer to seller. I'm going to teach you, how to fix your credit. I'm going to teach you how to utilize your credit, right? I'm going to teach you how to form your business, right? And I'm going to give you so many more different resources, links, so many different workbooks, so many different ways to, we're going to be talking about fasting soon. We're going to be talking about and I'm gonna be doing it with y'all, man. Like I'm gonna be doing it with y'all. Like I really have been diving into it more. I was wilding for a while, and I'm just trying to, just get into diving in deeper into my personal health. And I would love to do that with you guys. I would love to go on that journey with everybody. So yeah, just like, comment, and subscribe, man. Let me know what y'all feeling. Like I said, we're gonna be coming back next week. I'm gonna be talking or not next week as well, but I'm gonna be coming back tomorrow. I'm actually be talking about just how to master, a skill set, right? I'm gonna be talking about what am I gonna be talking about tomorrow? Hold on. I'm tripping, y'all. See, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. Let me look at my calendar. That's right. I'm gonna be talking about how to escape the rat race, how to quit your job, right? And I'm gonna be talking about, if you don't want to quit your job, if you're at somewhere where you like, how to, maintain that and still grow a business, right? And I'm gonna be talking about shifting that mindset, right? So yeah, everybody tune in tomorrow. Again, this is the Wealthy and Healthy Podcast, and you are tuned in with K Capri, KD, and I am going to clock out, and I'm gonna see y'all soon. Appreciate you.